I have a software development background, work on writing code just about every day as things allow. So what I want to speak to everyone today about is what it's like to actually work with an AI agent or an AI bot to do some pair programming and to use it to help accelerate your own software development. Ordinarily, when I do these kinds of talks, I do actually show a lot of code, but this will be kind of a no-code coding presentation because I think that that'll be appreciated by many of you here. Anyhow, I'll be going over some AI in the news, talking about some of the clickbait that we've already been seeing today, and then from that we'll be springboarding into some guiding principles of pairing with AI, and then have some considerations, takeaways, any time for Q&A after that. So anyhow, I think we can start with some of the scary headlines. I know many of you are super familiar with some of these. They're in the news pretty much constantly. You know, a quarter of computer programming jobs just vanished. What happened? Software engineers are worried AI is ruining the job market. As much as 30% of Microsoft code is now written by AI. AI now writes a big chunk of code at Microsoft and Google, soon going to Meta as well. And then this one, no surgeons, no chefs. Bill Gates reveals the only 3 jobs AI won't replace. That last one's especially clickbaity. If you read the actual article, he's saying that programmers should be safe, especially if you get to be familiar with AI. If you have some friends, kids entering the job market as software developers, you're probably very fearful for them. If you've been in software development for a number of years, you're probably afraid for your future. These headlines make it especially important that we learn how to adapt to a future and maybe move on in some way, or maybe not. At any rate, along with all of these scary headlines, some tools have emerged to work with software developers. I am a software developer who unapologetically uses AI every day. I'm not one of the software developers, and I know many of them who'll say, yeah, I used it. It really only confirmed the stuff that I was going to type anyhow because I'm super smart and I really know all the stuff. I'm not super smart at all this. The technology landscape is vast. I don't know the method signatures for everything that I'm going to be using. I use AI for this all the time. And tools that I use are GitHub Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT. I use a lot of them. And these tools can be added into your development environment alongside it through browsers, of course, and phone apps. And they help developers in a number of ways. They can suggest some code snippets. They can write entirely huge amounts of code for you. There's a lot of autocompletion. It can generate unit tests. It can generate some really good, high-quality documentation. And it can be especially compelling to dive into it, write one sentence, and suddenly have an entire working application for you. And with that in mind, we have seen that a lot of developers have grown to embrace a lot of these tools, even if on the side they say, well, I don't really need it all that much, but they're actually using it a lot. And from a recent study, productivity has improved, efficiency has improved. These tools are extremely easy to adopt and learn very quickly, and a lot of developers have expressed a high level of satisfaction with using these tools themselves. Now, I would say that within these metrics of like productivity, efficiency, quick adoption, there are some devils in the details here. If we are measuring how many pull requests there are, meaning how often are we committing our code to our repository, getting some code reviews. How often are we actually pushing this code through and building it and all of that? That's a measurement that can be telling on some level, but there are some other measures that show that maybe some developers are taking some shortcuts and are not being especially conscientious about the way that they actually use these tools. And so what we have is some other studies that show that with the adoption of some of these AI tools, there's been a very high level of code churn. And what that means is that with all of this code that is being pushed and committed to the repositories, all the builds that are going forward, we've also found that with all of these code commits, there have also been a lot of commits that have happened a week or 2 weeks or maybe a month down the road that have reversed some of those. Because maybe we decided to take the suggestion from the AI bot and just push it through without really scrutinizing it. We gave that one sentence suggestion and everything came forward really, really fast. Along with this is a really important statement from Wikipedia about GitHub Copilot itself. One of the tools that is used by a lot of developers to help write the code. And that is that the autocomplete feature from GitHub Copilot is accurate roughly half the time. Now, I think it's actually amazing that with all the code that it's putting out, it's accurate about half the time. But that also would indicate that it's inaccurate roughly half the time too, right? And so that is likely what is leading to a lot of this code churn and a lot of people actually being skeptical about the merits of AI. But to echo some of the things that Donna said earlier on, we shouldn't just look at that first experience we have with these AI bots and say, oh, well, it wasn't quite 100% accurate, I'm going to throw it away. What we need to do is to embrace these AI bots as kind of our pairs that we're going to be working with and to go on a bit of a journey with them and understand that there's going to be a give and take. Maybe the first response isn't going to be more than 50% right, but if you work with it and get to know it a little bit better, perhaps we will get to better outcomes. So, in fact, this is really the crux of what I want to talk about today. So how do we move from this world where coding jobs are vanishing, according to these articles in the press, and AI-generated code goes unscrutinized, to a world where developers and AI are true collaborators, where we're working together? And where I tend to go from there, what I use as a North Star on this, I have actually a couple of North Stars, if you can have two. And one comes from Ethan Mollick. I don't know how many of you are familiar with him, but he's a brilliant professor at the University of Pennsylvania. And he wrote this book that came out early last year called Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. And he also has a really wonderful blog, lots of great tips and tricks for how to work with AI. And this book is wonderful, and it's even a year later, I think, still relevant. So his first tip on partnering with AI is to always invite AI to the table. I myself, as a developer, have found it to be an indispensable partner, and I am, per Ethan Mollick's advice, always inviting AI to the table. But the second part, which I think is truly, truly important, super important, is to always be the human in the loop. Don't just take what AI gives you. Don't trust that it's going to be 100% right. We know it's not going to be 100% right. There are hallucinations that are rather famous. It's getting better, which actually is his third point, and that is that you should assume that this AI that we're working with today is the worst AI you will ever use. Essentially meaning that it is consistently getting better. We've even seen today that prompts that we might have used a year ago or a few months ago that didn't return very many results have now learned a lot more from these large language models, and they are consistently improving. The hallucination rate is getting ever lower. But we should still scrutinize these things as they're coming forward and make sure that we are the experts who are working with AI, because we know our particular part of the world that we're working in better than AI is, at least for now, okay? My other North Star is Agile. And I have been working in Agile. I mean, when Sanjeev had us raising our hands, I had mine up for a long time. I do come from an Agile engineering background where I really embrace the principles of test-driven development, behavior-driven development, and a lot of the incrementalism that is important in Agile. And I think that when you work with AI as a pair programmer, another important principle of Agile, when you work with AI as a pair programmer, you need to think about how you would move forward using Agile as your North Star. So incremental development is super important. Yes, AI can come forward in a matter of minutes with a huge block of code, and that's fantastic and super impressive as a prototype, practically indispensable. But if you want to start moving this code into a production environment, especially in a highly regulated environment, I find the incrementalism to be an absolute most important place to start. So you need to work in small, reversible changes, because if you go too big, it's almost impossible to pull back and really figure out where some of the problems may be. Frequent testing, whether it's automated or manual, but especially where I come from, I always want the tests to be automated. You execute these tests early, you execute them often. When you get the signal that something broke, that is your signal that you need to go back maybe even to the AI pair and say, something about this didn't quite work right. Let's figure this out and work on it together. It's better when you have one failing test than a whole bunch of them, right? I always work in these fast feedback loops. So I am constantly working with my AI pair all through the day. And what might have taken me and a human colleague a week to get through, working with other tools in the past like Google and Stack Overflow, now does take me much less time. But it still is time consuming, a lot of back and forth. And the fast feedback loops are ever important. With all of this, I'm able to refactor with confidence. I'll let AI suggest changes, but I rely on my tests, my human insights to make sure that quality is always ensured. And then the final principle here that I think is super important is in this continuous collaboration to treat your AI pair programmer as a junior collaborator. I am the expert. I'm going to be providing the guardrails and the guidance, and it is going to be essentially doing a lot of the typing and some of the boring stuff, okay? So here are some guiding practices that I have. And as an example, I want to kind of bring back, for any of you who were here a year ago, you might remember that Bob Martin was here on the stage talking about the importance of test-driven development. And I think that test-driven development is especially important to think about when it comes to AI and pair programming. Okay, so one thing you can do with these AI pairs is say, hey, here's my prompt, this is the kind of application I want, can you build the whole thing for me, including the tests? And if your prompt asks for all of that, you'll get it. You'll get something that has the code, it has tests, it'll compile, tests will probably pass. You can just commit it to your code repository, push it, and hope for the best, right? But As Bob Martin would say, and he said right here on the stage, test-driven development is dual entry bookkeeping. Everything is said twice, once on the test side and once on the production code side. What is important to keep in mind here is that if you ask AI to write both sides for you, it is going to naturally take what it thinks is the intent and get tests to match it. You are no longer in this cycle of dual entry bookkeeping. You have one person, artificial person, who's keeping mind on both sides of the bookkeeping, which it wouldn't be good by any accounting standards, right? So one other thing that Bob Martin has said, and this wasn't necessarily about AI, but about tools that actually generate automated tests for you, is that this breaks the concept. The generated test is not a human restatement, it is an automatic translation, and the human states the intent only once. So if my intent is stated only by the prompt, and we know by working with these AI bots a lot that the first time you put your intent in, you might not be all so clear about it, right? And so if it misinterprets your intent and then writes all the tests and all the code based on this mistaken intent, you're going to get some kind of funky results, right? And so what we want to make sure of is that we state the intent clearly as humans, and that when we do this, often expressed through the tests that we are working on with our AI pair, then we are much more likely to get a product that is fit for purpose. Okay? So, to even emphasize how important this is, there is already a body of research that is emerging, and there's this one paper written called Generative AI for Test-Driven Development, Preliminary Results, and it found a few things. One is that generative AI is highly efficient. You can automate a lot of aspects of TDD and increase development speed. So that sounds really great. However, supervision is required. AI-generated code necessitates developer oversight to ensure quality and correctness, and there's a risk for non-experts. So if you're a junior developer who is guiding this other AI junior developer, you also might wind up with some kind of wonky stuff. And I often, as a software developer working with my AI pair, will say, I understand that you want me to write a unit test against this private method. I know this is super wonky right here, just going into this geeky detail, but I know that I should not be writing unit tests against that. Please correct it and provide me with something else, right? And so it's able to course correct based on my feedback, and I've provided that guardrail to it to help me move forward, as an example. I have found, as a developer, that it is really amazing to step back from the boring details, to echo some of the things that Donna was saying earlier, and let AI do the boring stuff for me, okay? I can have AI do boilerplate, getters and setters, write build scripts, config files, do a lot of database CRUD scaffolding. Y'all don't need to know a lot of the details of what some of these terminologies mean. Those things are as important as they were before, but I don't need to know the details of them. Let AI handle them, and then I can move my focus to other things, like trying to discuss architectural trade-offs with the rest of my team, thinking about the user experience, debugging complex issues. Those things are a bit more rewarding for me than writing stupid config files. If you are one of those persons who really likes writing the config files, you can stay at your desk with your red swing line and wait for AI to replace you, or you can move on to more enriching activities, such as thinking about higher level things. Okay? And there's been some more research to support that these are the things that people are leaning on AI as software developers to do. So this one paper, Dear Diary, the randomized control trial of Gen AI coding tools, found that to echo some of the headlines about 30% of code being written by AI, blah, 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 a lot of that 30% of the code is the boilerplate stuff. And that is relieving software developers of that burden and having to think through that stuff and allowing them to move on and redirect their focus to more creative activities. Okay? Okay, so here's an example of a pair programming session I had with AI, leaving out a lot of code and a lot of details. And before I go into this, understand that these are much shorter, but I do appreciate what Donna and Tricia showed earlier, because what I have been able to find when all this is that the more detailed my prompts are about what I'm asking for, the better the quality of the response is. So I ask, hey, let's start with the basic skeleton of a working Spring Boot application. And my AI pair says, okay, great, here's a basic skeleton, here's some files, you're going to get a controller, a service layer, a repository layer, some of the basic stuff you would expect in this Spring Boot application. So thanks, hey, but I prefer to use Gradle as my build tool than Maven. And it says, okay, great, here's your build script, it's in Gradle instead of Maven. That's fantastic. Hey, I'm having difficulties with this unit test I've just written, and what I'm finding is that for some reason it's loading the full application context. What's happening with that? I provided a full stack trace, a log file. It looks at it and says, boom, here's your problem, go fix it there. Amazing, and that took minutes instead of hours or days, right? Here's some useful tips for that. I say, wonderful, I have a working test, great. I would like to make sure my database works now for all of my different environments. Can you help me write the scripts for that? It says, sure, here are your YAMLs and some SQL build scripts for each environment. I say, wait a second, I added a test that I thought would pass, but it fails on this line, line 30. Can you help me figure it out? It says, you have a typo. The endpoint should have been George, but you have GEOGE. It's an easy mistake to make, right? I did actually have a typo in a test like it. It didn't actually have that endpoint, it had something else. But in real life, without it, I probably would have been working on that for a really long time. I tend to have more personal conversations with my AI bot, treating it like a real human. I find that helps. I usually say, hey, I'm about to go to lunch. It asks, enjoy lunch. Yeah. How was lunch? All those things. It does, I know it's not a real person, but it does make the interaction a little bit better. This is for individuals. When it comes to teams, teams can also benefit from this. Raj and I don't know how many of you know Raj. I'm sure many of you do. Yeah, give it up for Raj. We work with a lot of teams on behavior-driven development, BDD. A lot of times they find just writing the scenarios, the given, when, thens, to be really difficult. We can use AI to help them with that. So they can provide a scenario, say, hey, I want to withdraw a valid amount of money from an account with a balance, and then maybe we'll see the given, when, then, yeah. And this is a well-constructed given, when, then that a lot of teams struggle to do. But with AI, you can get that kind of feedback from them. Now I want another one that has withdrawing more money than is available, and I can write the edge case and help you with that. There'll be a lot of good give and take. You can make some adjustments, and teams can be guided through some of this kind of boilerplate stuff, given a good form to that. All right, so here's some tips for pairing with AI and some closing thoughts. More context equals better results. Include full error messages, stack traces, code snippets to get more accurate suggestions. Work incrementally. I mean, this is one of my biggest tips here. Don't go for the big bang. Ask for a little bit, test it out, verify it, test it frequently. If it veers off track, you can course correct together. Give it feedback. If you disagree with it, let it know. Let it know that maybe you don't want unit tests against your private methods or something like that. It will help you figure out a better course correction for that. Think out loud. Describe your goal before coding. The clear intent will improve your AI output. Don't outsource your judgment. AI can assist, but you own the decisions. You're in charge of this. Don't blame AI afterwards for delivering bad code into production. Ultimately, that responsibility is with you. And the final thing, which also comes from a Dear Diary paper, is that they recommend, and I agree with this, that organizations seeking to integrate generative AI coding tools into their workflows prioritize educating developers on best practices for their effective use, including the critical task of validating AI-generated code. I think if you just throw these tools at developers, you're kind of asking for some bad outcomes. If you help them adopt it, understand how to scrutinize the code and get better results, AI as a pair programmer with your developers will help your organization thrive.